Okay, hi everybody. We are studying today Masechet Eruvin, Daf Lamed Dalet 34. And we're beginning with a case that we saw yesterday, but we're going to give one more explanation. This is a case of a basket that's in a tree, and it's above 10 tefachim. We saw that according to the B, that is a valid eruv, and the question is why? If it's above 10 tefachim, then if it's on a tree, that should not be good. But he says in a basket, that's okay. So how does it being in a basket make it any better? We saw one answer yesterday that the top of the tree is actually 3 tefachim, and therefore that's a makom patur. However, it's still an appropriate case to talk about here because we said the basket is actually extending it, and so it does create a platform, which is necessary according to the Biuda. It has to be on a makom chashuv. You have to put the bread, the meal, on a 4x4 surface, and so the basket will extend it for that purpose. But it's still permitted to take it down because, in fact, without the basket, it's only 3 tefachim wide. So that was the solution of Ravina. We're going to see a second solution today of Rabbi Yirmiyah, that the basket can simply be tilted down. And according to that, even if you don't actually do it, since it can be done, it's okay. So we see a principle that something that's potentially true is like it's actual, it's like you actually did it, which is a very important principle. We're going to challenge that from 2 other cases. Then we'll see an eruv that's in a deep pit, the next part of the Mishnah, and then eruv that you put on a reed, and finally eruv that you put in a closet, but you lost the key. So you know where it is, but you cannot actually access it. Okay, so all interesting cases, and so let's begin with Rabbi Yirmiyah. Amashane kalkala ho'il ve'yacholim tota v'lahabi'ah toch asara. So here's the deal with the basket. In the case, this is right. So it is 10 tefachim high, and I put the basket down below, and on Shabbat. So this would seem to be a problem. That should be the same as if it's on top of the pole. I also can't get it. So how is the basket any better? So Yirmiyah explains that it's because it's hanging on a pole, and I can simply tilt it down, and then I can access it because it would tilt down to less than 10 tefachim. And even if this involves a Rabbanan problem, but that's okay because we're doing it if as long as you can do it ben hashemashot. So that's why the basket is okay. Whereas if it's on top, I don't have that way to get it. All right, so that's a solution. Now we're going to challenge this from 2 places. In other words, even if I don't actually turn it, because I could turn it, because I could tilt it, then it's okay. So let's ask about this. That potential is like actual. Papa was repeating this answer. And Rav Shaba asked Rav Papa. This is always interesting because Rav Papa is simply repeating what Yirmiyah said, but Yirmiyah is not around anymore. And so now the questioner asked Rav Papa, who's only repeating what he said. This reminds me of one time there was a conference, and the person supposed to deliver the paper couldn't make it, so someone read the paper for him, and then they got questions from the audience, but the person was only reading it. It wasn't his paper. How's he going to answer the questions? Okay, but if you repeat it, that means you have to take responsibility for it. So he says, how about a following case? This is regarding placing an eruv when Yom Tov is on Friday, and then you have Shabbat. Yom Tov has the same law that you can't walk more than 2,000 amot. And so you have the same, you can also make an eruv techumin for Yom Tov if you want to walk far. So let's say you have Yom Tov and then Shabbat right after. And you want to carry more than 2,000 amot in one direction from your city, both on Yom Tov and on Shabbat. So you got to really place the eruv there twice, once on Thursday, twilight, and on Friday twilight. So, but you want to use the same bread, and you want to make sure that no doesn't get lost in between. So this is how you would do it. Kesadu oseh, molicho barishon umachshich alav, venotlo ubalo. So you go there on Thursday late afternoon, and you put the bread in that place. You stay there until it gets dark, and then you take it with you and you bring it back home. this is on Yom Tov, so Yom Tov you're allowed to carry, so that's no problem. And then you keep it with you all day Friday, and then Friday late afternoon, and Friday afternoon you go and bring it back. It's still Yom Tov, so you can carry it there. And so you wait till after sunset, then you wait till it gets dark, and then once it gets dark, you eat it there on the spot, and then you have your Eruv Tichumin set up for the whole Shabbat, because the meal doesn't have to stay there the entire Shabbat as long as it was there when it got dark. And so so that's the solution. And now we'll ask, Amai, hold on, why do I have to actually bring it back on Friday? Nema kevan di'iba'e amtuye maseh mamtile afagavdela amtiye keman de amtiye dameh. According to you, Rabbi Yirmiyah, or the Papa, repeat it in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah. You said that since a basket, I could tilt it down and could access it. Therefore, even if I don't tilt it down, it's still accessible, and therefore is a good eruv. Why don't you say the same thing here? Let's say I have my eruv at home on Yom Tov, and Shabbat starting soon. Well, I say I could, if I wanted, carry it out there and bring it. But since I could do it in potential, then I don't have to actually do it. We'll consider the potential as if it's actual, right? So this question would actually, challenge almost any time you make an eruv. You could say, I could bring it there, so I don't have to actually bring it there. Certainly because it's Yom Tov and you're allowed to carry. So that is the question. And the Zera answers, Gezerah mishum Yom Tov shechal liot ahad haShabbat. It says, actually, you're right. We do agree that potential is like actual, and technically that would be okay. The only problem here is a side problem, which is if Yom Tov is on Sunday and Shabbat comes first, then we're afraid. Since usually you keep your meal at home and you say, I could bring it there, then you're going to think that you could do that on Shabbat also. But on Shabbat, you really cannot do that, because Shabbat you're not allowed to carry. And so there's actually no way that on Shabbat you could bring your eruv there so that you can carry on the next day, which is Yom Tov. And so therefore, since people are going to get mixed up between doing this on Yom Tov or on Chol and doing this on Shabbat itself, therefore, that's why we have to, everyone has to actually bring their eruv and put it in that place. If not for that, yeah, potential is like actual. Okay, so this could have far-reaching effects, this rule of potential being like actual. All right, so we resolved that. Then the second difficulty to the B'yamiyah said you could just tilt the basket. למטה מעשרת טפחים עירובו עירוב, למעלה מעשרת טפחים אין עירובו עירוב. Okay, so Braita, different variations of the cases we already saw with a tree, now instead with a wall. So if I wanted to make my designated place in the Shut Harabim, and so I put my eruv, I put the bread on a wall. If it's below 10 tefachim, that's good, right? Because that makes sense, because that's also the Shut Harabim. Here we have a picture here, right? So here's where I'm going to be, my place on Shabbat. So if it's below 10 tefachim, that's also the Shut Harabim. So I can just go up and get it, right? It's very easy. But if it's above 10 tefachim, then anything above 10 tefachim is no longer the Shut Harabim, right? Shut Harabim only extends up to that far. So this is going to be a Shut HaYachid, and then I cannot bring it down. I cannot access it. So that's the first law here. And second law, נתכוון לשבות בראש השובח או בראש המגדל, למעלה מעשרת טפחים עירובו עירוב, למטה מעשרת טפחים אין עירובו עירוב. Now we're just flipping it around. Let's say I wanted my place to be up here. Let's say this is my designated place of Shabbat, up on top of this closet, right? Or on top of a dovecote, if there was a dovecote up there. And so in that case, if I put my bread also up high, that's good. They're both up high. They're in the same place. But if I put my bread lower, below 10 tefachim, then that's not good, because this is Reshut HaYachid, and this is now here is Reshut HaRabim. So, right, so in other words, they have to be in the same place, so it doesn't matter up or down. All right, that is what the Baraita said. Now we're going to ask, Ve'amai, hachiname ne'ma ho'il v'yacholim totol hobi'o letoch asara. So you said potential is like actual. Well, in that case, why can't I simply say that since I could take this closet and tilt it down, right? So my place of my resting place will now be brought into Reshut Harabim, and so I could potentially do that, and therefore, even if I don't do it, it's like actual. So isn't that the same as the case of a basket? And right, but yet over here we don't say it's permitted; we say it's prohibited. This is not a good eruv. So how are you gonna answer that? It'd be Yirmiyah. So Amar B'Yirmiyah, you could say Hacha b'migdal mesumar askinan. Perhaps it's talking about a case where it's nailed into the wall, and that's why you can't. That's why you couldn't, right? But you're right. In fact, if it was not nailed, that would be okay. That's one answer. Rava Amar. You don't even have to. You have to say that. Maybe some a very tall one, a very tall closet like this. And in this case, because it's so tall, if I would tilt it down, then the angle is such that it would then extend past 4 amot, and then I would be carrying in Reshut Harabim, right, 4 amot across. And so that would be the problem. But you're right, if it was shorter, then in fact I could, but I only says it's not allowed because it was tall. All right, so through that, we're able to resolve those questions. Okay, Hechi Dameh. Now, right, one more challenge to that question. Hold on, maybe if the cupboard had a window and you have a rope, then you could access it in yet another way. It's good. We have all these pictures here. So in other words, here I have my place of resting is on top of the closet, and this is below tentavachim. But if I attach a rope and there was a hole in here, so I could just stay here and pull the rope, and that would be similar to the basket that I'm tilting down. And so, right, wouldn't that be okay? He says, yeah, you're right, that would be okay, but this case is where you don't have a rope and you don't have a window, and that's why this is not permitted. Okay, but we actually end up saying that potential is in fact like actual. So that's an important principle. Okay, now, so we finished the case of the basket, and now we're going to talk about the eruv that's in a deep pit, which the Mishnah said is okay. You can put the eruv in a deep pit. Even if it's 100 amot deep, that's fine. So let's analyze this case. Where is this the cistern? Exactly. If it's in the private domain, if it's in your backyard, it's all enclosed, and then so that's fine, because even so what? So it goes down. Reshut Hayachid goes all the way up, and so too goes all the way down. So, and that would not be, that would be Reshut Hayachid, and you're in Reshut Hayachid, it's in your backyard, so that would all be fine. אלא דקה רשות הרבים נתכוון לשבות היכה, היא למעלה הוא במקום אחד ורובו במקום אחר הוא, היא למטה פשיטה הוא ורובו במקום אחד. Okay, so we established that it must be that this cistern is in a public domain. Okay, fine. Now, where are you? Where are you going to designate your residence? If it's below, in other words, down in the pit, so you're in the same place as the food. You put the food down in the pit, and your place is down in the pit, so that's all fine. In other words, the pit itself is the Reshut Hayachid, assuming it's 4 wide and 10 deep. If you put the food down there, yeah, right, then it's all in the same place. If you're above, I switched it around. If you're on top, up on the ground, and that's the Reshut Harabim, and then the food is down all the way down there, and that's the Reshut Hayachid, then that's a different domain. And if it's a different domain, then obviously it's no good. So in either case, you're not telling me anything new. Either I'm not with it down there, I'm up there on the Reshut Harabim, and then definitely it's no good, or I am with it, and that definitely it is good. So what am I learning from this case? So we answer it's actually not in the Reshut Harabim, but rather in the Karmelit area, which is in between. It's Drabanan, Reshut Harabim Drabanan, Mitkaven Lishbot Lemala, and I'm going to be above. So I'm up there in the Karmelit, and the pit, or deep in the pit, is the Reshut Hayachid. ורביהי דאמר כל דבר שהוא משום שבות לא גזרו עליו בין השמשות. And this, we're following Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and he's the one that said that during Ben HaShemashot, during twilight, I'm allowed to violate anything that was only asur midrabanan. The sus karmelit is only asur midrabanan. So therefore, after sunset, before Seter Kochavim, I would be allowed to go from karmelit on the ground down into the pit and to retrieve the eruv. And so therefore, it is accessible before dark. And that's why, according to the B, it is in fact a good eruv. And that concludes the discussion of that Mishnah. Now, in that conclusion, we established that this Mishnah the authorship is Rabbi, and this is going to be important for the next Mishnah. Okay, so next Mishnah is Eruv that you place on a reed. Mishnah says as follows: Ditano berosh hakaneh or berosh hakundas bizman shu talush v'naus afilu gavoa me'ama hareh zeh eruv. Okay, so I placed it on top of a reed or on top of a pole. That's where I put my meal. As long as I uprooted it and then replanted it, then even if it's very tall, that is fine. But it's important that it not be currently planted. See, if it's currently planted, then it's the same as a tree, and then we'll have all the same problems we had before. So it has to be not planted. Okay, so that's the law. Now the Gemara is going to say, wonder about this. Ramele Rav Ada bar Matna l'Rabba talush v'naos in lo talush v'naos la. So only if I uprooted it and put it in again, so it's not connected to the ground. But if it was connected to the ground, then it would be a problem. Okay, Maneh, who is the author? Rabbananhi damre kol davar shu mishum shevut gazru alav ben hashemashot. Right, only makes sense that this has to be Rabbanan, because you said if it's planted in the ground, then it's a problem. Well, why is it a problem? According to the B, right, something that's planted in the ground, like a tree, is only asur midrabanan. I can't use a tree midrabanan. But according to the B, that's no problem, because I'm allowed during Ben HaShemashot to use the tree, and so therefore it is accessible. So according to the B, it shouldn't make a difference whether it's planted and is a tree or is a pole that's not planted. It doesn't make a difference. It is accessible either way during Ben HaShemashot. So therefore, it must be this is the opinion of Rabbanan, because they think that I'm not allowed to violate even the Rabbanan anytime after sunset. And so therefore, if it's on a tree, it's not accessible because I cannot use a tree. And that's why, according to Rabbanan, I have to make sure that's not planted. I pluck it out and put it back in. So the authorship of this must be Rabbanan. But that's not so good. You just told me that the previous Mishnah's authorship is Rabbi, and this one is Rabbanan. Now, I mean, it's separated here, but when you read the Mishnayot together, original Mishnayot, they're all continuous. And so it doesn't make sense that, just right in the middle, we're changing authorship. So this is a problem. So he answered, oh, this question was already asked. This is a play on words here. Rameh, when you is a question word. That's a key word. It means to lift up. So when you have a contradiction between two equal sources, you say Rameh, right? He raised a question. He put these two side by side and said, look, there's a contradiction here between the previous Mishnah and this Mishnah. The sage who asked this question is Rami, so his name means also the word of the question. Okay, anyway, he asked this question already and he answered it. He said, in fact, yes, that Mishnah is Rabbi and this one is Rabbanan. So although it's problematic to say that, but it happens that there's different authorships of different parts of Mishnayot. Okay, so that's answer number one. But Ravina says, Amar kula Rabbihi. In fact, the whole thing is Rabbi, and you're right. Technically, according to the B, you're allowed to use a tree during Ben HaShemashot, so it would be okay. The problem here is that it's a reed, and a reed is very thin, and so therefore we're afraid that you're going to come to break it and uproot it. And that would be a violation of Hilchot Shabbat, one of the 39 melachot. And so therefore he says, don't put your eruv on a root that's in the ground, that's planted in the ground, because you may come to uproot it. But if you uproot it before Shabbat and then stick it back in, then that's okay, because even if it breaks, you're not violating, uprooting something that is planted. Okay, so that's Ravina's second answer. Now, regarding that answer, we have to clarify whether it's something hard or soft, and we do that through a story. So a certain army came to the city of Nahar De'ah in Bavel. Amar lehu Rav Nachman, puku avidu kibushe kabshe be'agma. So these soldiers, they needed a place to stay, so they stayed they were staying in the Bet Midrash, in the place where the students usually meet. Maybe not Bet Midrash, wherever they usually met, maybe in someone's house. Now the soldiers are staying there, so there's not enough room for the students to meet on Shabbat to have their study. So Rav Nachman said, before Shabbat, he said, go out to the marshes and push down all the reeds that are there. So then tomorrow it'll be easy. We can sit on the reeds. So you see that they're sitting on these reeds. Now, that's the story. Ite be'Rameh bar Chama Rav Nachman. So Rameh bar Chama, the same sage we had before, that was asking Rameh bar Chama. Okay, maybe this is the place where he was asking that. So he said, he asked Rav Nachman, some people say another student asked Rav Nachman from our Mishnah, talush v'naos in, lo talush v'lo naos la. Mishnah says only if the reed were uprooted and you planted it again, then you can use it, then you can put Eruv on it. But if it's planted, you're not allowed to put something on it. And so here you're telling us that we should just pat down the reeds and we can sit on them. How are we allowed to sit on the reeds on Shabbat? Isn't that like using a tree, right? Wouldn't that be a problem? Or isn't it a problem that then they might break? And so how are we allowed to go and sit on the reeds on Shabbat? Amarle hatam be'uzradin. Nachman said in the Mishnah where it says you're not allowed to put your eruv on it, it's talking about hard reeds. And hard reeds, right? If you go and something's in the way and trying to get to it, it'll break. And that's the problem. And that's why it's no good there. But in our case, where I told you we'll sit on them, talking about soft reeds, and the soft reeds, we don't have to worry that they're going to break. Okay. How do you know there's a difference between ones that are hard and soft? Detanya, hakanin, vatadin, vahigin, min ilanhen, ve'enan kilayim bakerem. So here it has reeds and other items, boxthorn and thistles. These are all like trees. And then kilayim bakerim, and so therefore trees are you don't have a problem with kilayim planting mixed things is only refers to vegetables and vines, and so these are trees, and so they're not a problem. They're like trees. These items are like trees. But I have a second baraita that says kanim. This is kanim. This is a nun with the mem, but they're the same thing, right? Reeds, bakidan, bahur banin, and kesha and bulrushes, min yaraken, then kilayim bakerin. Says all these are vegetables, and therefore they are a problem of kilayim if you plant them with vines. So kashahadadeh, we have a question, we have a contradiction. This said that reeds are like trees, and this one said reeds are like vegetables. So which one is it? Ela shma'amina kan be'uzradin, kan be'shenan uzradin shma'amina. Rather, must be different types. The first one, where it says like trees, that's talking about when they're hard. And the second one is talking about when they're soft. And so this explains the story above. When they're soft, then you can sit on them, then you can use them. When they're hard, then they're like trees and you cannot use them. And also you're afraid that they will break. Okay, one last question about this case. You mentioned in the second category, kidan, kesha, among the vegetables. So v'kida min yaraku, is that true? V'hatenan en markivin pegam al gabe kida levana mipnei shu yarak ba'ilan, that you cannot graft rue with kida levana, white kesha, because that is grafting a vegetable onto a tree. So the rue is the vegetable, the kida levana, that white kesha, is a tree. So look at that. See, now why'd you say that kida is included among the vegetables, whereas here it's considering it a tree? So look more carefully. This is talking about kida by itself. That is a vegetable. But kida levana, this white one, that is a tree, and that resolves that contradiction. All right, and now we are up to the last case. The key, you put the eruv in a closet and locked it, but we lost the key. Mishnah says, "Netano b'migdal ve'avad ha'mafteach." It's okay. In other words, you even though you can't access it, but it's right there, and you know where it is, so it's all right. Rabbi Eliezer omer, "Im eno yodea shemafteach b'mkomo eno eruv." If you don't know that the key is where it's supposed to be, then it's no good. You have to actually, be able to access. You have to know where the key is and be able to open it. Okay, so that's the machloket. Now we'll ask, ve'amai, according to Tanakama, that says it's allowed. Why is this allowed? You're in one place, and the eruv is in a different place. We saw this phrase before regarding different rishuyot. I'm in one rishut that's in different rishut, but because of that, I cannot access it. Okay, here it might be right next to me in my living room, but still I cannot access it. So therefore, it should not be a good eruv. Why just tell me it's a good eruv here? Oh, actually, we're talking about a closet that's made out of bricks. Which would seem to be worse if it's made out of bricks. That's harder to get into. But we're going to see some about bricks there. There's no mortar in them. It's just bricks laid upon each other. So it's easy to take apart. This Mishnah is in Masechet Besah. Over there it's talking about the laws of mukseh. And so it's talking about food that you put into a closet and you locked. So that food you might think is mukseh because you didn't have in mind that you're going to use it on Yom Tov, and so out of reach and mukseh. But Rabbi Meir says no. If you want that food, that's okay. You can open it up and take from it. Ditnan bait shemileuhu perot satum v'niftach. Notel mimakom hapetach. Rabbi Meir omer potech v'notel lechatechila. So there's two opinions in that, but in that Mishnah, if you have a storehouse full of fruit and it was closed up, and an opening, a wall fell and it opened up, you're allowed to take the fruit that's inside. In other words, you don't consider it mukseh. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Meir is even more mekel. He said you can go and make an opening in the wall and take it out. So you see that Rabbi Meir says, since he says in that case you're allowed to create an opening and take out what you need, so too regarding the eruv, it's true that you lost the key, but if there's any way to access it, there's always some way to access it. You break open the side, then that's okay. Last comment for today. Now it doesn't mean that you can actually go and take a hammer and start breaking it. But rather, Shmuel said over there, it's talking about layers of bricks. In other words, there's no mortar in between. It's just stacked up, so it's relatively easy to take it down. So we said that's the case in the Mishnah in Besah. So that's a different case. Now we say, no, it's the same case here also. That's the case it's talking about. So therefore, according to this, when the Mishnah says that when you lost the key, the eruv is still good, it's not talking about any case. If it's in a safe and you lost the key, then there's no way to access it. Forget about it. It's not a good eruv, even though you know exactly where it is. It's only talking about a case where it's true, it's in a closet that's locked, but there's a relatively simple way to access it. And so in such a case, it's still a good eruv. And tomorrow we'll continue a few more questions about this case. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen v'amen.